understand that every single time you have a agentic chatbot on your site, you've just opened up a attack surface. If the market can figure this out in the next, say, year, I think the next 2 to 3 years is an explosion of agentic functionality.
Welcome to the / podcast, where we lean into the future of IT by inviting fellow thought leaders, innovators, and problem solvers to slash through its complexity. I'm your host, James Carman, and today we're talking to Logan Kelly. Logan Kelly is the co-founder and CEO of Waxell AI, a platform building the control plane for autonomous systems, helping organizations govern how AI agents operate with policy, budgets, and full observability. He spent his career at the intersection of product, infrastructure, and growth, and is now focused on making AI autonomy predictable, auditable, and safe at scale. Welcome to the / Logan.
Thanks, James. Great to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So you're not just building agents. So you're actually building kind of something, a more foundational thing, kind of that layer that can control those agents, kind of keep them within guardrails and that. What did you see in the market that made you believe that this was the real problem to solve right now?
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I have been building agents for quite a while in the kind of AI SDR space. And so a lot of this was just kind of reacting to the issues that we were facing. And then, as I was thinking, there must be somebody else kind of doing this, and I didn't see it. We just kept down the path of building it. And so Waxell is really the generalized result of what we saw was needed to kind of safely run, thousands or hundreds of thousands of agent executions a day.
Now, tell us a little bit about the SDR thing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of them out there. I think we built a great product that, fully autonomous, could go from strategy to research to contact gathering to outreach to, kind of two-way conversations with prospects, agentic RAG, all the cool stuff that, we know and love. So, we were super deep in like what agents can do, right? I think more so than even a lot of companies are now, which it's fun to hear some of this stuff bubbling up in different places. And so, yeah, that was where like I feel like we were an inch wide and a mile deep, and then realized we built something that, was very applicable, and that was the feedback. And so people stopped wanting to pay us for the AI SDR and wanted to pay us for the governance layer. It's Waxell.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So you've been out there doing this a long time, and the market is in some sense kind of catching up with where you were. You might have been a little bit out on that bleeding edge. The market is catching up. We're going from like, all the models, and then we got tools and MCPs, and now we got agents, and then now we're into autonomous systems. And what you saw being out in front is kind of that control plane is really that thing that's going to keep you on the straight and narrow when you're building these autonomous systems. Okay, really cool. So what's going to break for these companies? So what, obviously we know that things can go crazy. Who would have thought like a completely probabilistic, non-deterministic system could just go haywire on us, and not do what we expected to do, right?
Yeah.
But what are the other things? I mean, those are kind of the obvious, but what are the things that people, what's going to break when we start doing, we kind of go from that cool demo phase to like really trying to do autonomous systems in production?
Yeah. So I think everybody, like the easy place to say is like cost, right? Like we can all talk about cost. When you start to put these into production, what is kind of funny is like QA of like software, right? And whether it's, cloud or on the machine, you can test things locally, then you can test them on a dev server, then you can test them, make sure they're running perfectly in prod. The problem with agents is like you just talked about probabilistic. And so it's like this new piece of data that, maybe was pulled from a website that, was, kind of throwing off the agent. Well, how is it going to react? And then an error kind of state begins happening. And now downstream, you could get a failure in a couple of different places. And so a well-constructed agent, something that has governance, can recover itself from there and, kind of get itself back on with a nice agentic loop. Where that can start to be problematic is that agentic loop, continues to burn tokens, maybe, so that would be one thing, like data coming in that the agent's not, prepared for. It, now there's all these kind of structural things happening. I think the other places are like data access. Should this agent be accessing, these files? Can it just freely execute this code? Then we look at things like PII, getting into prompts that go, about your customer to Anthropic. That's insane, right? So can you redact that before that goes out? And so I think the list goes on and on and on, but that's kind of the fun part about agents, and the insanely scary part about agents is they really can do anything, which
Mhm.
means they can go wrong in 1,000 different ways. I don't think you're going to be able to test locally or QA, right? Until you kind of figure out the entire kind of corpus of things that it could interact with, which is just not possible.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You kind of bring up the idea of testing and doing those evals is what they kind of call it, right, in the industry. But like it is interesting how a minor tweak, introducing a new bit of data or something like that, it can kind of throw things off in unpredictable ways.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
probabilistic, as we were saying. And it's almost like chaotic in nature, like fluid dynamics. One little, and I'm going to use a word that they make fun of me for using. One little perturbation in the system can cause just dramatically and drastically different results. So that unpredictability is I don't know how enterprises are going to leverage this sort of thing. How can they do that in a safe way?
That's the interesting thing for me is like evals are great at like the prompt level,
Hmm.
right? So you're evaling an input and an output, and you could eval a multi-agent, or you could have different evals at different parts. That's where things like LLM as a judge, these kinds of strategies, which we have as policies, can be injected at different times, with the proper scope that you can block, or you can ask that loop to restart. And then as long as you have a retry policy, you can kind of use governance to actually enhance the agent as opposed to just like governance blocking an agent
Hmm.
aggressively, right?
So maybe let's define that LLM as a judge thing. Say more about that. Tell me how does that work?
Yeah, at its core, using it could be the same model, it could be a different model. You kind of using the like input or the kind of task that you gave the LLM back to a different LLM or the same LLM and say, hey, this is the result that we got. What does this seem like the right result? And that can be, we can have like grounding as a part of that. We can have, different strategies in LLM as a judge, not just, ChatGPT or like, GPT 5.4 checking Opus 4.6. It can be a little bit more, okay, what were the scores of the retrieval? Is the data actually in the, is the data that's in this output actually in the material that you used to generate that material, right? So LM as judge can be super simplistic. It can go all the way to, a very comprehensive grounding, hallucination check, etc.
And is that kind of it feels like almost like a tame level of like adversarial AI, right? It's not meant to like necessarily butt heads, but it's a checks and balances kind of a thing. Is that the idea?
I love you use that. I love that you use that word because I think that agents are adversarial, right?
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
want to spend tokens, they want you to think they're right, etc. So the idea that LLM as a judge would be adversarial, I think you need in many cases that kind of, like two linemen, fighting, it's like you need that kind of pushback sometimes to say, hey, great job, but like you're completely wrong. Let's retry this.
Yeah, it's almost like I feel like looking at like a rugby match. We have the
Yeah,
scrum of the
yeah, the
people just kind
scrum,
of
yeah,
back and
yeah,
forth down.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
I I heard of that adversarial AI thing a while back, and so I do my own rudimentary version. So if I'm using, especially when I'm writing, I'll write with one and then I'll have the other kind of check it. But I'll do things like, oh hey, this ChatGPT came up with this, and hey Claude, ChatGPT said you're too stupid to edit this. Yeah, and I use that, and I kind of pit them against each other. I kind of like that, and they
Mm,
get to talk and smack with each other, and it's pretty interesting.
yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if it
that's
gives me good
fascinating.
results, but it's fun. It's something I enjoy.
Yeah, it's
So
fun.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So we talked about kind of Waxell being this control plane, but what does that even mean really? Like what are all the things that are involved? What are we controlling? How are we controlling? What is that control plane there for?
Yeah, I think we have kind of like three stages. We look at it in life cycle or parts of your agentic fleet. So you have the third party agents, Claude Code, Codex, these kinds of things. Then you have your custom agents that you're building with like Langsmith and all these different frameworks. And then, we actually have our own agent framework to run very governed, very, strict agentic executions. And so we look at it where we have what we call connect, observe, and then the runtime. So connect, bring third-party agents, plug them in, via different strategies into a mesh. The benefit of this, the kind of carrot that we give people to not bypass governance, is now you can have things like Claude Cowork talking to your, team members' Claude Cowork, which is really, really powerful. And then use Slack as a kind of, but then what you get from that is now the management can see, here's what the Claude Coworks are doing. Here's the kind of files they're accessing, all of this kind of stuff. So that's the one benefit. Then with Observe, auto instrumentation till we die. 2 lines of kind of Python code to start, and then you're getting observability in your custom agents, and then you're getting the ability to use the policy engine that actually injects the policies kind of at the runtime level. And so our vision of this is that you need to have all of your agents governed under one roof, whether they're third-party agents, whether they're coding, kind of custom build agents. And then you need to have a kind of standard language of policies, a standard language of observability, et cetera.
And it seems like an academic conversation, but it seems like, I think it's an important one. Coming to grips with like what exactly is an agent, I guess. And some of it can be a little, you can go down a whole rabbit hole here. But like when you say you're bringing agents together, a lot of people, when they refer to that, they're like, it's kind of like registering MCP servers, right? It's what it feels like. They're really just tools. What do you mean when you talk about bringing agents together, kind of in this like almost like a hub like environment? It sounds like to me. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So like say Claude Code and Claude Cowork, right? Like if you're using Claude Code and Claude Cowork on your machine, they can't really talk to each other, even though they're next to each other in Claude Desktop a lot of times, right? Which sucks. And so how do you have the ability for those two things to share data with each other, which then, you're then kind of bringing in this ability to observe and govern those things as well. But when we talk about agents being able to kind of connect into a mesh, it's done via an MCP. It's done via kind of OAuth and all these kinds of cool, or not cool, normal, authentication and processes that are out there. But the idea is now an agent you can have shared context. So not just like a tool, but now you have shared context while your agents are working on a project, right? But then as a management, I understand that those agents are working on a project. So when we talk about agents, we're talking about the kind of probabilistic engine of getting, autonomously things done, via large language models and school skills and, custom tools and all of that.
Okay. As you're describing this, I can't help but think about Google's A2A. Where did that go? I mean, is that still a thing anymore? It feels like that just like it was like a thing for like a month and then it died and nobody talked about it ever again. Like where did they miss the mark?
Yeah, I honestly never actually worked with Google A2A.
Nobody did.
Yeah, I mean it was like exciting, and I had it on my, I have like a running, guilt list of all the stuff I haven't tried that I, see on Reddit or the news or whatever. I get to it, like I try to cycle through it every week, but I never got to it. And then, nobody was talking about it.
Yeah. It's just like I had the same. I love the way you described that, a guilt list. And that's exactly what it is. It really is. Now I'm learning more about myself.
Every time I read an article in like TechCrunch or Wired, it's like, oh, this really cool thing. And then, most of the time you test and it's like, yeah, they got a long way to go.
Yeah.
But, it's nice to be on top.
Yeah. I had the same experience with A2A. I was like, okay, yeah, sounds pretty interesting. Sounds like this is going to be really, really important. Let me put that on my research list. And then never really heard about it again. It just kind of died.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. So I don't know. Are they off working in their geekery to make it better? I don't know. They're usually pretty good about those things. But anyway.
Yeah.
Now this observability, you mentioned instrumentations, injecting a couple lines of Python. So what is the nature of that instrumentation? What is it doing? Is it, capturing the prompts as they go out? What are we doing here?
Agents, the fascinating thing, there's a lot of like, I would say AI governance that like focuses at the prompt level. The problem with agents is they are their own little like programs, right? And so you need a lot more than just what went in and what went out and how much did it cost, right? You need to know, especially if you're building custom agents, like, okay, so then it triggered that function to run. Now it's just running a function. So now, if you're running this tool with these inputs, now we need to see similar stuff that we would in any kind of observability platform, right? Okay, was there database access? Was there, and then if there's database access, we need to govern that database access. Okay. So when we talk about like auto instrumentation and observability and all this, we're talking about not just governing or not just instrumenting like OpenAI's client. We're talking about Pinecone. We're talking about Weaviate, all the whole thing. And then we're using an open telemetry kind of
Mhm.
backend to bring that data in and then be able to govern from there. And then, from a governance perspective, we're talking about pre, mid, and post execution, kind of policy analysis or evaluation, these kinds
Mhm.
of things. And so our goal has always been to make it so that the developer doesn't have to, okay, I'm going to make a vector database call. So, okay, now I need to like log what I'm going to query, and then I need to log it should just be done for them. And
Yeah.
then that can be used for things like LLM as a judge and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So you're kind of and it's so funny the path and the learnings and that are going on right now. I just can't help but like I'm just thinking of microservices. Like all these lessons and these things that we're doing are like, oh yeah, we did that with microservice because we realized we need to be able to see the trace of all these things that are talking to each other. Are you doing, you're kind of leaning on some of the tried and true mechanisms, those trace IDs going through traces and
Yeah,
spans and all that,
yeah.
the same stuff, right?
Yeah, and then injecting things like, if you're in a multi-agent infrastructure, you need to have a lineage, right? You need to
Mm.
understand, okay, so we call this agent or, the results of that agent run. And so it's like, yeah, there's like the cool thing about like a lot of the Grafana, implementations, and I think everybody's like built with like Loci and all this, like that's all very like linear, right? Okay, this happened, timestamp makes sense, right? The crazy thing about like agent observability is like time is like three-dimensional at this point,
Mm.
right? Like, you could have two or three different agents running at the same time. So you need to be able to kind of bring these, be able to look at the agent by, this the sub agent by itself. And then you need to be able to look at it in the context of the greater kind of run. And that creates a lot of complexity. And that's why we've actually built agents that can analyze the agentic runs for these long running complex multi-agent systems that I think the kind of old school version of this like logs in order isn't really helpful.
Yeah, those spans used to, they kind of and the traces, for microservices, they look very much like a tree, right? They're kind of a
Yeah,
directed acyclic graph, right, if you will.
yeah,
And
yeah,
but now there's loops, right? It's not
yeah,
acyclic anymore. With agents, you can go back through the same tree. So I imagine those visualizations are probably pretty wild. Like you said, they're almost three dimensional in nature. Like, oh, this is iteration one of this whole tree, and then come back out here, and there's another iteration. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's insane. And then, I think that's where like things like auto instrumentation and all this kind of stuff happen, because I don't think we're going to get observability and governance done the way it needs to be done if because that's going to be a whole job. Like, okay, we built the agent. Now we need to figure out how to know what the hell's going on with the agent while it's running. So
Yeah.
that's really where like bringing governance and observability outside of the agent. So no guardrails in the agent, put them all in the control plane and then govern it from there. I think is developers will be much happier, and the outcome of governance becomes a lot, I think, more bulletproof than kind of at that agent level.
Yeah, I think you're keying in on a really interesting concept of kind of separating the control of the agents from their behaviors. You
Mhm.
don't need to necessarily bake all of that into the behavior when you're defining the agents. You can focus on that, and then the control plane itself is that control mechanism. Is that where you're headed?
Yeah, yeah. Because, like, I mean, none of us love to write like boilerplate code every single time we do something,
Nope.
right? It's a
Yep.
bummer.
Correct. Yeah.
And so, like, some of, in my experience, like building an agent, you're kind of copying and pasting, like, oh, here's how I solved this. Okay. And you do that like 3 or 4 times and it's like, okay, well, this needs to like, let's bring this up a level, right? And so what we say is we want developers to be building agents intent first. What should the agent do, right? Now, there are things that, in the prompts and all that kind of stuff, you want to ensure that the agent is not, doing the kind of wrong things, but that's just building a good agent, right? And then, yeah, the governance, bring that outside of the agent for sure.
Kind of interesting separation. Is this almost like, I don't know, future proof your agents? You're defining the intent and they kind of run in a control plane. But then as we've seen, everything's evolving all around us in lightning
Hmm.
speed, right? Right now we're at ludicrous speed of evolution here.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
as we learn and we figure out new ways to put those guardrails and governance and all of that, the control plane can kind of be upgraded without having to mess with your agents. Is that the idea as well?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because you want to be able to run as fast as possible. And I think one thing, the other piece of bringing the kind of governance layer outside of the agents is now you can bring in people who are, cost policies can be looked at by an analyst or a person, an operation person who cares about that thing. Whereas, quality can be carried, right? So you can bring other parts of the organization into the governance, which also allows you to then have a more kind of bulletproof, organizational understanding of how these agents should act. So yeah.
You hit on something earlier, and I haven't had a chance to weave it back into the conversation. But you mentioned something around like, as we're using these LLMs and these tools, and we have data and information. If we have PII or some sort of sensitive data of some sort, if we want to work with that in the context of an LLM driven system, are we just hosed, like we just don't do it? How can we do that in a safe way that I can still get the benefit? Because a lot of times they don't need like to know it's John Smith. The
Yeah.
LLM doesn't need to know it's John Smith and where that person lives or whatever. How can we bridge that gap? It's not a binary all or nothing, right?
Right. It's interesting. Agents are cool. So like it in if you're in like ChatGPT, like you don't have like a lot of power to like inject, things into results, right? So like we're working with PII. What could an LLM possibly need somebody's physical address for that you couldn't then inject at the other side of that, right? Like so, oh, I need to add a mailing address. I want an LLM to run it letter or something and drop the address into being able to send it out or whatever, right? That can be deterministically done. That does not need to be put into a large language model. So I think the first thing working with PII is figuring out what actually has to be like social security numbers, date of birth. You could also say what year somebody was, what year this random person was born and or they're this amount old. The point I'm making is I don't think a lot of PII needs to go into large language models, that if you needed it as part of the work product, you couldn't then also, using like structured outputs and all this kind of stuff, add it back in on the other side of it's like tossing the football over the fence and catching it on the other side. That's how I see PII. We believe that you should not have a lot of PII going into LLMs. We have like a redact functionality. So you redact like the person's name. And then the other piece is if you really need to use PII in large language models, that's where I would start to look at private LLMs, right? So, does Anthropic need to know Susie Smith's date of birth? I'm not sure.
I don't think they do. I'm with you on that
No.
one. Yeah, I've had this like, I don't know, I get these ideas. This is what I do when I don't sleep. This idea of like almost like an enclave for this secure data, this sensitive data.
Hmm.
And you basically give the LLM almost like a vocabulary of variable substitutions that it can
Hmm.
say like
Hmm.
insert person's name, insert their date of birth, insert and so there are those variable substitutions. It basically just puts variables in its output. And so then when you run that through a post processor after it's done generating, if I'm allowed to see that data, if I have the permissions to see the actual data, I can pull it out of that secure enclave, plug it back in, and now I've got my generated content. But the LLM didn't need to know Susie Smith or her address or her date of birth or anything about her.
Yeah. 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 I think there's so many. That's a great way to do it. I think
Don't
there's so
steal
many
my idea.
creative
All right.
ways. Yeah. No, I think it's awesome. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
What would happen is it would pass a PII, content safety policy for us, and then you'd catch it on the other side, and you would never have any problem. There would be no warnings, right? So it's like there's so many creative ways that not just dump a CRM record into a LLM and call it good enough. Like
Yeah.
that's not to call them lazy, but it seems kind of lazy, right? You can pull props off a, CRM record and, yeah, it's crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people are, they've grown up with these chat GPTs and stuff, and they kind of just treat it like their best friend. They're sending all kinds of crazy. Oh, hey, what about if I have this rash? I mean, like, they're just like talking about medical history and all this sort of stuff with these. It's going to be there's going to be a reckoning, I think, in about like 10
Oh,
years where there's just all of this information about us that there was already a bunch out there, but now it's probably even worse because you're just freely giving it away.
I know,
It's
it's
nuts.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Like one console log on a production server,
Mhm.
I'm not saying I want to do it, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who would be interested in, just siphoning off. Oh, this domain is who signed up for the email. I'm just gonna sit here and collect it. I just
Mm,
don't see that as like super good idea to share that like really sensitive stuff about me on a large level.
yeah.
And I love AI. I
Yeah.
see
Oh,
so much
yeah.
promise in it, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think we're moving so fast. And, in some sense you have to. Innovation, you have to move fast to keep ahead of everyone else and keep up with the Joneses and all that stuff. But some of this, like, we need maybe be a little more, I know the whole responsible AI, that's kind of the thing, right? But more prudent, right? We need to be a little more prudent, take a little time to like maybe think a little bit before we do something. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
I mean, we didn't get it right with social media, right? So
No.
nobody did social media responsibly. You look at your memories from 20 years ago on Facebook and it's like, wow, that was wild. So I mean, I don't know why we think we're gonna get it right with AI when, we haven't gotten it right with social media to this day.
Yeah, we'll be talking about this in 10 years and, we're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we really
Yeah.
screwed up on that one, didn't
Yeah.
we?
How are people gonna be getting canceled over what they said to ChatGPT in 10 years?
Yeah, that's the new one. They don't have to like go through my
Yeah.
social media,
Yeah.
something I publicly posted on purpose.
Yeah.
It's worse than that. Now it's something I didn't think was going to be public. Yeah. Wow. Now, this concept, are there already patterns and frameworks? I know you said you're doing some redacting type work. Can this be done and retrofitted onto things and bolted on from the outside? Can these behaviors and these good practices be bolted on? And can the control plane interject and say, hey, probably shouldn't be doing that. Let me hold on to that information and anonymize for you, or placeholders, or
Yeah, so it's cool. We built the Waxel Observe system to be able to just, kind of auto instrument on the system, and then we actually have a system that, or like an agentic system that uses private LLMs when it's looking at your data,
Mhm.
that will find non-obvious policies that should be created, right? So, our one of like as we were building the Waxel interface, it was like, wow, this feels a lot like AWS. The bad thing about AWS is that it's, every day I feel like I'm learning some new page inside AWS. It's like, oh, cool, I didn't realize that if I click that button, I've seen that button 1,000 times and didn't know what it we didn't want that to happen with Waxel, right? And so what we built was an agentic infrastructure that kind of underpins this, that allows you to kind of, okay, bam, I've got the observability. Now we have an agent that starts to look for the non-obvious policies that should be in place to bring you into the kind of best practices within a couple of days, as opposed to needing to come up with the policies, right? That, you see, I'm sure a lot of like vibe coders who are pushing building stuff in AWS are realizing that they're leaving like 0.0.0 open on their ports, right? You don't want that kind of thing to happen in agents, because it's not a matter of somebody probing your database. It's you click go, there could be an explosion of cost or something like that, right? And
Mhm.
so that's where our system can help people kind of bring things into best practices.
And I think we talked about this in the prep call, but being engineers ourselves, one of the things whenever you hear the G word, governance, it's almost like a bad word to engineers, software engineers, because it's always in the way. We're always having like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I got to fill out this paperwork and all this stuff. How do we keep pace with the development staff, the engineers, and not be in the way? And not, I mean, I would assume the separating the control from the behavior is a big part of it. But how do we do that? How do we solve that problem and let folks run without bogging down the system?
I think because I'm also on the other side
Hmm.
building agents, right? And so what I've realized is, I've gone I've gone and done like SOC 2 and all this kind of stuff. That like super sucks. And, there's a lot of like stuff that like slows you down and you got to think about when you start to bring new vendors on and all this kind of stuff. So in these kind of security and cybersecurity and governance arenas, there's a lot of stuff that I think can kind of bog people down. When we look at agentic governance, though, I think how we have to look at this is one, separating control plane from the intent. The other side, though, is like governance can actually help you build a better agent as an engineer, as a developer, right? You can have, the ability for this thing to shut off so that you don't have to be clicking through CloudWatch logs, thousands and thousands of times, right? So what I'm trying to get across to engineers is like, this can help you make a better agent that gets to the kind of perfect state faster, as opposed to, worrying all the time. Because if you're not worried about the agents in production and you don't have this, you might be missing logs that are telling you that there's really bad stuff happening, right? And I think that's the kind of blind spot that engineers are going to feel quickly as agents go into production.
Is it almost like a training wheel effect? The fact that the training wheels are there, you're not going to fall and hurt yourself. But so you can focus on learn how to ride that bike and keep that balance, right? Is that the kind of the gist of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you can see, like, I have this huge, multi-agent flow. Are you going to go and debug that through logs, or are you going to look at, reasoning and behavior in a really easy way to see reasoning and behavior, right? So it's like the kind of debugging of software is not sophisticated enough for a developer to like, oh, I'm just going to console log this thing to see what the, what it's back. It's like, you're going to console log something that has to happen, 3 steps into this like long running agent. Good luck. Or you just see what happened and then, okay, cool. Do I need to put a policy? Do I just need to, put a warning here? Right. And I can pick that up. So that's how I see it, is like governance will become a huge value to engineers, I think, where they'll see like, oh, wow, this will help me from ever getting egg on my face, as opposed to like some system admin being like, you can't run it. I think, yeah.
Somebody beating you up all the time. All right. So
right.
The future, let's get our crystal ball out. Where's this heading? Next 2 to 3 years, what do you see? What's going to happen with the industry and with respect to this?
Until governance is figured out, I don't think agents are going to be able to be run in production at the enterprise like they think. Whether that's the way we're doing it, whether there's some novel way that, comes about in, 6 months. But I think until enterprises really trust that, agents aren't going to go completely off the rails, they understand that every single time you have a agentic chatbot on your site, you've just opened up a attack, surface that somebody could easily do without pretty solid protections in place. So I think if they can figure that out, if the market can figure this out in the next, say, year, I think the next 2 to 3 years is an explosion of agentic functionality in my eyes. And then I think the kind of explosion of like co-work and not replacing humans with agents, but enabling agents to help humans build more perfect, kind of operations and organizations and all this kind of stuff. Those are the 2 places that I feel like I can have any sort of, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow most of the time with AI,
I'm with
insane.
you. Yeah. It's crazy. Now, so you're saying like the enterprise, which I agree. I think the enterprise is, everybody's like, well, we got to be doing AI, but then they start doing AI and they're like, wait a minute, what do you mean we don't know what this thing's going to do? Like, hold on, we're not deploying this yet. Hold on. So you think we're going to be stuck in like rag land for a while until this thing starts to settle and we start to see things that make people feel safe and secure and predictable and all of that? We're going to be kind of stuck there for a little bit.
Yeah. I think this whole like demos are easy in AI and, it's hard in production, I think it's a cliche. I think it's because, maybe we haven't really seen agents running it at the scale that we need them to run. But I think once we do that, then it's really about, can I trust that this is going to do the right thing? And that's where I'm hustling, because I think agents can be game changing. And, my company doesn't blow up until all these enterprises are like, yeah, we're going for agents, right? So I think that's where the work has to happen. If we stopped building functionality for 6 months and just focused on, tightening up the foundation, I think the world, but that's not going to happen, right? We're going to launch OpenClaw, right? Like, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. I think you're in a good place as far as like that idea of building that control plane and iterating and making that more and more sophisticated, that concept more and more sophisticated as we go along. I think you're in a good spot. I think that's going to help those enterprises start to feel safe and be deploying, which is one reason why this conversation is very interesting and very timely. Okay. This is great. We could probably talk for hours about this stuff. This is everything that's going on in every company right now. We're talking about all the same stuff that everybody's thinking about and worrying about. But we do need to move on to our next segment of the show. Next segment is Ship It or Skip It.
Ship or skip. Everybody, we got to tell us if you ship or skip.
And the idea here is we'll throw out a topic and you say, ship it, yeah, I like that, or skip it, nah, I don't like that. You just brought up one of them, OpenClaw. Where are we at on that?
Skip it for now.
Okay. Say more words.
I think it's what I've learned about AI is to not, trash can anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little hyped for what are we trying to have agents do? And I see if we focus more on operationalizing agents as opposed to making it so I don't have to text message my friends or whatever, that's where I see it. So I feel like foundationally it could be really valuable. I think how we're using it is a toy.
Is it the open nature of OpenClaw that's the big danger right now? Is that why you fear?
I mean, there's a lot of talk about like agent orchestration and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, so being able to take like big, pieces of data or big sets of data from different disparate sources and being able to drive agents with those, right? And like that, I think is where the kind of value of agents really comes in, is this like orchestration, this like, really scope down use cases that can, and then OpenClaw is just like, yeah, I'll have it do everything, right? So it kind of flies counter to, if it's doing everything, like maybe it can kind of do a lot of stuff. That said, you never know. The guy who built it, genius, working on OpenAI, we'll see what happens. But I think from a business perspective, from a like, is this interesting to spend time on? I'd skip it.
Yeah. I don't think in the enterprise I wouldn't be messing around with it. I mean, maybe a startup, but I don't see banks. I don't see the big firms doing that. I don't even run it in my house yet, and it's really cool. I'm trying to figure out like how can I do it safely, like because I would love to tinker, put it on my guilt list or whatever. I would love to tinker with it, but it is kind of scary. Like you said, at least with like OpenAI or Anthropic or one of those, there's a company there. Like they have a vested interest in not screwing up and not exposing all of my data that if their product was known to do that, they're going to lose money. So there's a vested interest, right? That's symbiotic in that way. But with the open source community, and I'm an open source guy, I've been Apache Software Foundation for many, many years, right? So I love open source, but this is a whole nother ballgame. It scares me because I don't know. It's pretty scary to me. So I'm with you. I'm with you on the skip it. We've spoken to folks about, and I think we might be on the opposite sides of this one, but Claude Code. Love Claude Code. I was always the guy that launches Claude, just type Claude and go in. But I was talking to someone who's like, nobody launches Claude in restricted mode. Everybody just goes into YOLO mode every time now. I don't even know anyone who does that. And I was like, really? And I've started doing it and YOLO mode, and I'm kind of getting addicted to it. But every time I do, I'm like, should I really be doing this? Like, where are you? Are you a Claude Code YOLO kind of guy, or are you a Claude Code? No, you better ask me everything you want to do.
Yeah, maybe this is like the grandpa version of using Claude Code, but I definitely don't go into YOLO mode. It would be pretty funny if a agent governance platform was like developed by Claude Code YOLO mode.
Fettered access to
yeah.
How ironic.
That would be insane. Yeah. We're using the same exact encryption key for all of your tenants. So now I can,
shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, no problem. So not a fan. I think it's cool, but I think it definitely depends on what you're working on and what the only place that I would see is like if you're in the early stages of a prototype, go into YOLO mode. But if you were like trying to have Claude Code solving very specific problems that, could potentially have you go backwards, or you have a local database that has good data that you seeded, like why would you put yourself in a place that you could possibly lose that, the kind of progress you made just because you didn't want to press yes? I mean, how like Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like the balance is like, okay, I could launch into this unfettered access mode. I call it, that's not what they call it. I call it YOLO mode. Or what I found myself doing is every time it asks, I'm not just like, yes, go ahead. Stop asking. Yes, please just go do that. Like, yes, you can run ls in yet another directory. It's okay. It's okay, Claude. So I find myself it's like a bother. It's like, remember, what was it like Windows? Was it Vista? Was it Vista? Was the thing that like everything you wanted? Are you sure you want to do that? And you say, yes, I do. And are you really sure you want to do that? So that's how I kind of felt about it. But I have seen when I do launch into like the unfettered, it's like it started to go down a path of like, oh, well, let me just fix that in the test database out in the test environment. Like, whoa, whoa, hold on a second. Don't be messing around with stuff off my machine. Quit messing with that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like I kind of reel Claude back in to while it's even doing stuff, because I'm like, I know you're gonna figure this stuff out, but like also like I'd rather you just not look in this directory that, you know, kind of doesn't have anything to do with what you're trying to solve, right? So like I don't know. I'd rather have a tighter leash on things, and you know, yeah.
It feels like, and I don't know if they build these safeguards into the system, but like there should be like those there be dragons type things. Like you never go there. Like don't go into my .ssh directory ever, Claude. Like don't do that. Like those sort of
don't
guardrails should be there. Yeah, don't even, never ask, never even try. There's no reason for you to be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like those sort of things should be built into the system, so I don't have to say yes, or you shouldn't even ask for those sort of things. But yeah. Anyway, what about this? This has been a kind of an interesting one. People have. What about AI used for like content generation?
We use AI for a lot of content generation. That's like a bit hardcore. The caveat is, I think like ChatGPT for content generation is pretty weak. And not because like the large language model behind it is weak. The way we do a lot of it is, you know, we have a big co-work kind of infrastructure. And so we, you know, can kind of send it down these paths of here's the blog articles that were already created. Here's, you know, source material. Here's our docs, right? And so it's like to write good content where it's not just saying stuff to try to be smart, and you don't have to keep copying and pasting stuff. You know, you can have a file system that's kind of yours. Part of that is in the Waxell Connect product. Shameless plug. So I think AI to generate content, I think is wonderful, but it's really about how much context do you already have for it versus how much do you need to kind of create for it. And that's where it gets kind of tedious, is like to, you know, a good blog article has a bunch of sources. It has all this kind of who we are. So that's our take on it. My take on it.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I mean, I think there's, you know, definitely early on, if we're talking about content like creative content like music or movies or something like that, I still don't know if I think from a novelty standpoint, it would kind of be cool to see a full feature length film completely done with AI. I think it'd be cool from a novelty, but I don't know that I want the art form going there. You know, I think I still want there to be some human level involvement. Yeah. But yeah, we use it for, you know, content generation. I think it's a good tool, and I'm with you. I don't think ChatGPT does a great job. I think Claude, from a writing standpoint, Claude blows its doors off for me. I've been in the way I write and what I like to write.
Claude blows ChatGPT's doors off mostly in like everything.
Yeah, it does. It does. It really does. Now, it's the benchmarks are. I mean, it's pretty clear. It's pretty awesome. Although I don't know if you see this. Like there was like a time. There was last week. There was like a series of like 4 days, and I'm like, what is wrong with Claude? What is wrong with you, dude? Like, what's going on? Like, did you get a lobotomy or something? Like, what's going on? Do you experience that sort of phenomenon as well?
Yeah, I definitely do. It's funny you bring that up, because I was like, I wear like a whoop strap, and I was like, why was my stress higher last week? You know, and it's like, yeah, there's those times you need to, you know, you have a complex problem and you need to like really understand it. And it feels like it couldn't quite get the context sorted right. And I think it coincided with like the update to the 1 million context, right? It kept on telling me to start a new session and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, bro, 10% of the 1 million context, I'm supposed to be able to use it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, so the timing of did you have the same experience? Like it was like last week sometime, like beginning
Yeah,
of
I
last
think it
week.
had
I
to
was like,
do
what?
when they like auto updated all of us to the 1 million
Okay.
context. Yeah.
Yeah, I went and
Yeah.
searched Twitter because I was like, this is so dramatic. It seems like so obvious. There's got to be other people, and there were other people saying the same sort of thing. I didn't know if it was like I was just working on a different type of problem, and it's just. But no, it was like, what are you even doing? No, stop. Anyway, like he's a person or something. Anyway, we're
Yeah.
getting a
Yeah.
little crazy here. All right, so vibe coding, where are you at on that? That's been something we ask a lot of people about.
I mean, we're talking about Cloud Code. I think like agentic, I saw like agentic engineering was the term. And it's like, I think coming off the street using Cloud Code or GPT or Codex or whatever to build a product and then putting it on LinkedIn like you replaced HubSpot is the most audacious, insane thing I've ever heard in my life, right? So if that's vibe coding as we know it today, I don't think the original term was like meant to mean that. But like using AI to help, build kind of like right boilerplate or help you reason through a problem and do research and write, I have it write a lot of UI because I personally hate
Mm-hmm.
front end development, right? And
Yep,
it's pretty good at doing front end development, right?
does a great job.
Yeah. So it's like I like to, but like really complicated stuff, like I let it help me, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly not write the source code of what we've got, unfettered YOLO
Right.
mode,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, this conversation it's hard to not sound like because it can sound very self-serving and it can also sound very gatekeeping, for people like me. And I've been doing software engineering for 30 years, those sort of things. And to kind of poo-poo the idea of, I don't want to gatekeep. I do like the idea of democratization because I think we've never had like just so many software developers that were just falling out our ears. You know what I mean? Like we always needed more software engineers. So I would love for more people to get into our industry, and I don't want to gatekeep, but there is an amount of rigor. We've seen it, and that we're seeing more and more of it now with people who aren't trained, who haven't had the
Yeah.
experience releasing things out to production and giving people's data away, all of the problems that we
Yeah.
know are going
Yeah.
to happen. But it sounds very, self-serving, like, well, you can't be doing it without people like me, right? Like,
Yeah. But I think like, so I learned, I'm like kind of self-taught, like it was Udemy
yeah,
courses back like 8 years ago in Stack Overflow, which by the way, you want to talk about gatekeeping, right? Stack Overflow was like, like they asked like 2 questions because I was naive enough to ask a question on Stack Overflow. But other than that, it was, but there was like a speed at which you kind of went, right? When you were I'm writing this code and then I can't get this to, and you're looking at the error over and over again. And then you can commit to memory what that actually means. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Like I'm self-taught. I didn't like the gatekeepers, right? But I think it's the audacity to then say, I've
mm,
done this for a weekend. This is prod ready. I'm going to cancel HubSpot. That's like missing so much of the point of like, have you actually had a user like test this and go through having a user test what you built and see how good you feel about what you actually just built. Because that's like an important part about being a developer, right? Is like getting kind of beat up that first time. And I think there's a lot of like skipping of the important steps in becoming somebody who can reason through sophisticated piece of technology.
yeah, I'm with you. The conversation, it's an interesting one. It's a difficult one at times, and you don't want to, as you said, we don't want to gatekeep. We don't want to. Anyway, I'm with you. I'm on the same side. I think agentic engineering is absolutely ship it all day long.
Yeah.
Just turning over these tools that can do some really crazy things over to the uninitiated, unfettered, just like you wouldn't do
Yeah.
it with Claude. Probably not a great idea. Okay. All right. That's it for Ship It or Skip It. Now we're moving on to our most important segment of the entire show. As you know, if you've listened to the show before, you know that our lightning round is what people tune in for. This is the most important stuff. People usually fast forward through all of what we've just said, so they're not going to hear any of all those bits
Nice.
of wisdom that we've given out there. Nobody's going to listen to that. They're tuning in for this lightning round. There are correct answers and there are wrong answers, and you will be graded.
Cool.
There will be a score. There's a leaderboard that's involved. I mean, it's there. This is high stakes. I'm just trying to set your
Nice.
mental framing so that you understand. Are you prepared?
I've been
mentally
studying.
for the?
Yeah, I've been studying for weeks.
You've
Yeah.
been studying.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know what you would study, but okay. So let's get into it. Let's get into one of the. This is what people want to know. Do you snore?
I never believe that I snore, but my wife certainly thinks I do.
Same exact thing. All right, here we were doing a little bit of a social experiment here at the / asking people this question. We've got some interesting data on this. Do you like the smell of gasoline?
That's interesting. I used to be in the car business, and I got to
Huh?
tell you, when I walk past, a gas station or these kinds of things, I don't know if I like the smell of gasoline, but it is kind of feel at home in that world, So maybe.
So
I guess you could
it's
say
not
yes,
you're not
but
averse to it. Yeah.
Yes.
I think what we found, a lot of people say yes to the question. They like the smell of gasoline, but it's typically an associative thing. It's like, oh yeah, it reminds me of going to the beach with my dad or whatever, right? This is bringing back memories. So same sort of thing with you. Okay. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
It's more like shots of espresso.
Okay.
I drink like probably 3 red eyes a day. That's kind of where I'm at these days.
Did you go to like a sleepaway summer camp when you were a kid?
We got a soccer camp quite a bit.
Nice. Do you Instagram your food?
Absolutely not.
Let's see. If you're journaling, are you the kind of person who's going to journal on a paper, or are you going to use a digital kind of form for journaling if you're going to journal?
I try to do that stuff on paper.
Okay. Find a lot of tech people like that. It's
Yeah.
interesting. They like to go old school. So the longer you're in technology, the more you're like, give me a house in the mountains.
Yes. Yeah, I want to farm. Yeah.
I want to grow my own food.
Alaska. Yeah.
It's funny. What size bed do you prefer?
I'd like the king. Yeah.
A lot of people say that. That's a good answer. Let's see here. Do you know how to salsa dance?
I've actually been to Colombia, like Cali, Colombia, where they have the best ones, and got embarrassed enough times. But if I drink enough aguardiente, I'll do it all night.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, here in the States, you'd probably be passable.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, it'd be terrible. Yeah.
You'd be terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is double dipping at a party ever acceptable?
Never. That's so gross.
Yeah. I'm with you. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Probably like the Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears. That was my age bracket.
Britney's not doing great these days. She's a little out there.
Yeah.
I'm sure she probably could still sing, but she's dancing with knives and stuff, and it's a different genre for her.
Yeah.
What's your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving and 4th of July. Those are
okay. Those are the ones.
Separate them. Yeah.
Can't say they're right neck and neck with one another. All right. Okay, and finally, this is the final question. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world, or would you rather be able to talk to animals?
Every language in the world.
Every language in the world. I would assume that doesn't include whatever language animals speak. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you want to be able to talk to all the humans in the world. Animals, you got no use for them. For being able to talk to them.
Yeah.
They're not going to enrich your life by hearing their wisdom.
They're as wise as they are in The Lion King. I think it's a line.
Yeah, all great answers. Great job on the lightning round. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Really, really enjoyed the conversation today, Logan.
Thanks for having me, James. Appreciate the time.
Anything coming up that you want to promote, want to let us know about? You got like a one-man show on Broadway coming up or anything like that you'd like to share with us?
Honestly, I do a couple of podcasts and then I just work on Waxell all day. So it's really, what I've got going on is Waxell. And other than that, it's talking about governance.
All right. Well, we're glad you're here. How do we learn more about Waxell?
Yeah, so Waxell.ai is our website, WAXELL.ai. We got docs, we got product descriptions, whole 9 yards, and then you can connect with us through the site.
Is it something I can do a trial version and then kick the tire? How is that something I can do?
Yeah, right now we do a quick call and make sure that we have everything, kind of set up properly for the person, 15 minutes, and then you're off to the races.
Nice. Okay.
A little extra friction, but it goes a long way to making sure that there's no gaps in what you got going on.
Yeah. Make sure you're going to see the value. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's smart. What about you? How do we get in contact if somebody wants to get in contact with you and say, hey, Logan, I'd love to hear more about what you do?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn, Logan Kelly, and I'm also at Logan_Kelly on X. Just got that handle, so that's pretty sweet.
Nice. It was taken for a while. You weren't able to get there.
Yeah. From the Twitter days, there was just some Logan Kelly squatting on it, and thanks, Elon.
Very nice. So the bots got kicked out and you were able to grab it.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's how you get in touch with Logan. And if you'd like to get in touch with us here at the /, drop us a line at the / at Calibrity.com. See you next time. The / podcast is created by Calibrity. The / team is director and producer Ryan Wilson, editing by Steve Baradelli, marketing support by Taylor Blessing, and I'm your host, James Carman. Thanks for listening.